there was so much that you had to do when you're scaling a company very quickly. First, it was the office. I started in my lounge room, answering my home phone as Google Australia, so had to find the office to actually put people in. I scaled the team from me to around about 600 or 700 employees. There were many difficult discussions, interviews. I remember, a couple of really tough interviews that I had with media outlets at the start. The number one thing for me is the founder, and the founding team. So that is something that I learned over time, is just spending as much time with the founding team as possible to make sure that they're going to last and that they share a real passion to the product or the problem that they're trying to solve.
All right, Kate. So you were the first employee at both Spotify and Google in Australia. We want to know, how did you get those jobs? How were you the first employee?
Sure. Well, it wasn't really that easy. So I'll tell you the story. So I actually got into tech quite early, in about 1998. I was a Melbourne girl and started my career in human resources at a law firm in Melbourne, and then moved over into a sales job at a company called TMP Worldwide, who had just acquired Monster.com, which was a competitor of Seek back then. So they were looking for HR professionals. So that was really kind of my first foray into kind of understanding what the internet was. And it was when the internet was really just starting to take off.
Yep.
So I moved from Melbourne to Sydney with TMP Worldwide, and then the internet was really taking off, and I moved into a role in online advertising at a company called Aussie, and they were an internet service provider back then. And I moved into the online advertising sales team. And then the .com bust happened, but the only tech companies that were doing well were search engines, where marketing companies were still spending with them because they were getting a good return on their investment for their marketing dollar. So I worked at LookSmart for a few years, and then in 2002, I got a phone call on my desk phone, back in the days when you had a desk phone. I'm showing my age there. And it was the head of international for Google, a guy called David Lee. He was talking to me about setting up the Google office in Australia, and would I be interested in talking? So, of course, I jumped at the chance, jumped on a plane and went over to Mountain View. Back when Google was probably, it was less than 500 employees back then. So it was two little buildings in Mountain View, maybe about 300 or 400 employees over there at the time, and Google was only 4 years old. And I was super impressed. I did 10 hours of interview in one day. And then about a week or two later, I was offered the role. So yes, that was at the end of 2002, about September of 2002. And I started from there, growing the Google office.
So obviously Google's just started out in Australia. You've got this amazing job. Did you get to build your own team, and how did you go about finding the right people?
Yeah. So I definitely did get to build my own team. And there was so much that you had to do when you're scaling a company very quickly. So first it was the office. I started in my lounge room, answering my home phone as Google Australia. So had to find the office to actually put people in. So that was my first challenge before I could even think about hiring anybody. And then hired one employee about a month after me, and she remained with the company for a long time. And it makes me realize how important your second hire is, and really thinking about like your strengths and how you can work together, and making sure someone really can work in with how you work. And so I scaled the team from me to around about 600 or 700 employees, over around about an 9 year time frame. And I would say that it was challenging working within the rigor of Google's hiring policies. So they were very, very strict. We ranked colleges and universities across the globe. So we were always looking for top tier universities. We were looking for students that had or employees that had got great results across their career or in their college degrees. And it was a very stringent process. So every person had to be interviewed by at least 5 people. And then they went up to a hiring committee. And believe it or not, that actually ended up going up as a hiring packet to Larry and Sergey, the founders of Google. So you really had to make sure when you were putting someone up for a job that they were definitely the right person for the role, because you didn't want it to get that far up the chain and someone or the CEO or the founders of the company say no to a potential hire.
When did that process begin? Because I've had that experience as well, going to tech, where I was interviewed by 5 different people in the organisation, some senior and actually some beneath the role that I was going for as well. So they wanted to, I guess, get a full round picture of who I was from all different perspectives. When did that process begin in tech?
Look, I mean, HQ had been doing it for around about 4 years. As I said, Google was 4 years old when I joined, and they believed that was the best way to hire people. So I see, because I now invest in a lot of startups, I see one of the biggest mistakes people make is hiring the wrong people. And it's a very costly exercise. Once you hire people, whether that's your right-hand person, whether it's your CFO, whether it's an employee, particularly in Australia, it can be very, very challenging to out people from the organization. So it's just one of those things that they were very, very strict on, to just make sure that we're getting the right people on board. And they really enjoyed that 360-degree feedback. So it could be the receptionist, it could be the CEO, but we always made sure that we had really well-rounded feedback for our candidates that were coming in.
What is it that you think majority of people, what's the mistake that most people make in hiring, and why is it so hard?
Hiring too quickly. So a lot of people get impatient and hire the wrong people. I've seen it happen time and time again. If it takes you a year to find the right person, that's better than it taking 3 months and then spending a year and a half to try and out them from the organization. And then the other thing is really thinking about your skill set and the type of person that you're going to work in with best. So what are your strengths? What are some of the things that you find more of a challenge, and who are the people that you can hire that can really help you in the areas that you may not know enough about? A good example of that is when I started at Spotify, I didn't know a lot about the music industry. I knew a lot about tech. I knew a lot about marketing and media. And so one of the first hires was actually someone who had an extensive background in the music industry, so that I could learn from him, and he didn't know much about tech and media, and he learned a lot from me. So I think it's just looking at even doing a skills matrix and where are the gaps and trying to fill those with great hires.
So if someone is going to do that, I mean, to walk into an organization like Spotify, which is a music-based platform, well, it was at the time, right? And then you don't have a background in music. How do you weave yourself into that organization quite quickly? Because I imagine that you need to show that you are willing to learn quite quickly about that topic that is so fundamental to the system. Otherwise, you're going to get a lack of respect from the people that are there. So that's quite a challenge, I imagine.
Yes, but I mean, internally, there's a lot of training for new employees. If they don't know a lot about music, they learn very, very quickly. And I guess for me, I joined at a time at Spotify, again, the first employee there, where we hadn't even done any deals with the record labels yet. So I learned a lot during that process of, you know, how licensing worked and Spotify's revenue model. So, I mean, you just have to, you jump in the deep end and learn it very, very quickly.
You mentioned something really interesting there. Okay, so Australia is a very, I think, slow market, I would say. We're quite slow to a lot of things here.
You'd be surprised. They're actually not. They're a pretty tech-savvy country, and particularly like for music, they're the 6th largest music market in the world when I joined Spotify.
So was the pitch with the labels difficult then to kind of present this brand new platform? And I mean, I'm sure at the time there was always a lot of articles and news stories about artists saying they hated the streaming angle, they're not making the same money, all that sort of chat was happening around then. So how did you approach the labels?
Well, we had a market that was proven. So Spotify was born in Sweden and it was successful in Sweden. We had great relationships with the labels and artists were making money. So even though music streaming was very new to Australia and try to teach consumers a completely new way of listening to music was not easy. We had to spend a bit of money on marketing to do that. But because we had that proven model and it was not too difficult to replicate in each country, we got there eventually. It did take time.
I would love to know, and you don't have to share if you're not comfortable, but I'm sure there were really robust conversations as a disruptor coming into the market for, the record companies, for radio, for a lot of different, mediums that we're used to having, I guess, the lion's share, and then Spotify turns up and then starts to chip away at that. Did you ever get any argy-bargy or conversations that you went, oh, okay, I've hit a nerve there, or...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There were many difficult discussions, interviews. Like I remember, a couple of really tough interviews that I had with media outlets at the start. But a lot of it was actually misinformation. So once the labels understand the model and they understand it and they want to work with you, they're the ones that are working with the artists. And so, we got there. And I mean, it's now the largest streaming music service in Australia and the world. It's just, because it was such a different platform and it wasn't just teaching consumers a new way to listen to music. It was teaching labels and artists of a different way that people wanted to consume their music. Rather than buying an album download, it was consuming whatever you wanted instantly. It was a very, very different way it was a very different revenue model for artists.
Kate, if you're a small business in the tech world, seeing as you have such great experience in scaling such huge businesses, what advice would you give somebody who's looking to do that?
Well, it's a very, very broad question, but I mean, maybe I'll do it this way. So if I'm looking to invest in a startup or a business, whether that's myself in doing some angel investing or whether it's the VC firm that I co-founded over here called ALIAVIA, we only invest in female tech founders across Australia and the US. But you look for founders that are really trying to solve a problem that they're passionate about and they're creating a product that's unique. And I personally really, the number one thing for me is the founder, and the founding team. So you never want to go into investing in a product or a service. And I have done it before where, you don't know enough about the founder and you don't know enough about the relationship that they have with their team. So that is something that I learned over time, is just spending as much time with the founding team as possible to make sure that they're going to last together, and that they share a real passion to the product or the problem that they're trying to solve.
Okay, so how do you do that? What do you just hang out with them? Like, what do you do to get to know someone? Because I imagine when you're putting your money down on the table, you would want to make sure that risk is, as minimal as possible. So what approach did you go to, or what do you go to kind of get to know a founder or founders?
I mean, due diligence can take a long time. Sometimes up to 6 months. We tried to move quickly. And the fund invests in early stage tech companies, so in seed and pre-seed. So they really, if they're scaling, they need the money quickly and they need to move quickly. So, look, our due diligence process is we see a deck, an investment deck from founders. And if we see a spark or something that really interests us, then we will organize a call with the founders and get them to take us through their deck. We really like to get involved in the product or the service that they're offering as well. So, I mean, for example, if you were investing in a chocolate milk, you're not going to invest in chocolate milk unless you've tried the chocolate milk first. So we make sure that we have a full process of testing the product that they're working with. And then we spend a lot of time one-on-one with them. Sometimes that can't be done face-to-face, and particularly post-COVID. I mean, it's amazing. We were raising money in a time where people would never, ever give you money for a fund unless they'd met you face-to-face. But during COVID, I think that really benefited people like us who were raising money for a fund, but also founders, so that we spent a lot of time with them, but it was on Zoom. So, and you really want to understand how they work together, and do they get along, and can you see the synergy between them? And it's really, really important to do that. And then, then there's a financial deep dive as well, like going through their numbers. Do they really take care of their pot of money? You don't want them to be spending too much money. Are they tight on the purse strings and looking at every single cent that they send? Because you don't want to be investing in a company where they're just going to spend their money very quickly. You want to make sure that there's a runway for that cash. And then we go through to an investment committee meeting. So if we believe that we want to take it further, then we have some really smart people who sit in on an investment committee. They then meet the founders, they test the product, and then we decide whether we're going to move forward.
When you started at Spotify and at Google, and you had to go to market and convince people to take their marketing budgets out of their traditional platforms and shift them, or shift portions of them over across to you guys, I imagine that wasn't the easiest task at first, because people are stuck in their patterns and stuck in the ways of thinking. So I'm sure the same thing's happening now with AI companies. There's companies where they're having to convince people to, shift dollars into that. And how did you do that, and how would you advise people go through this new phase?
So, I mean, there were two completely different products, and also I have to explain them quite differently. But with Google, it wasn't actually very difficult, because it was all cost per click. So an advertiser could track their marketing dollars, and if someone clicked and it converted, their cost to acquire was very, very obvious. So you wouldn't put a campaign up on Google and not know what you spent and what you made. So it's very hard to compare that to, say, TV, where you're spending huge budgets, but sometimes you really don't know what it costs you to acquire a customer. But search engine marketing was very easy to do that. So that was an easy sell, to be honest, until we started getting bigger, and then there were all sorts of different forms of advertising, like on YouTube, and CPM pricing, or cost per thousand rather than cost per click. With Spotify, it was definitely more difficult. However, Spotify's audience was highly millennial. So for any advertisers that really wanted to reach a millennial audience, Spotify was one of the places to be. And a lot of brands really wanted to be associated with music because it was cool, and they wanted their brand to be seen beside a new music platform that was really highly targeted to millennials. So, we worked with companies like a lot of alcohol companies, companies like Coke, that we're really trying to target that genre.
Kate, you obviously starting these big businesses, and you're having to make quite difficult decisions when you're building a team, when you're starting from the ground up. How did you assess your risk management with your decision making?
I would say early days at Google, there was a lot of managing by consensus, which means that we had teams that were set up to work in a particular area. And if we wanted to make big decisions, we had a great team of people around us that could help us make the right decisions. We also, particularly at Spotify, we had market playbooks, so that every time we launched in a market, we would write about what happened, what worked well in that market and what didn't, so that when we launched in another market, we weren't repeating the same mistakes. And we were really focusing on the things that worked when we launched in markets. So believe it or not, even if it's, India, Australia, or Philippines, quite often the same kind of rules have applied, and the same things that made Spotify successful in one market made them successful in another, even though they could be completely culturally different.
I imagine in those early days you were having a lot of calls with Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify. So I guess how often were those calls, and then what were the key learnings that you learned from him?
I don't think I had any one-on-one calls with Daniel. I was interviewed by him when I first came aboard. In fact, I don't even think it was an interview. I think we just had coffee after I got the role. And he's actually a great guy, but we did not have weekly calls or anything like that. There were a leadership team that worked underneath him. But what we did do at Spotify, which was amazing, is we had a quarterly strategy days, they were called. So we had like the leaders from all around the world come in. Daniel led them along with his management team. And we talked about potentially new strategies, or there'd be a focus on a particular area. Like I was at Spotify when we were really trying to work out whether we focused on podcasting. And it took a long time to make that decision. So I remember one strategy day was really focused on a group discussion around whether that was going to be the way forward for the company.
I would love to know. So what year is that discussion, and what is being discussed in that podcasting? Because we work in podcasting, and we understand now where Spotify is taking podcasting with video, and that's their future. But yeah, what was going on in those days?
Oh, look, it was very early days, and I don't recall exactly what was being said, but we could see that the growth of podcasting, and we were trying to work out how it would work on our platform. Would we lose music listeners to podcasting? There were a whole bunch of questions that we were just trying to work through. I don't remember the specifics, to be honest.
Kate, you're doing some pretty amazing work with female founders. Is there a company that you can share with us that we should be looking out for?
Someone asked me this the other day, actually, and it took me a minute to think about it because there's so many great female-led startups that we're investing in. In fact, our problem is not a lack of opportunities of companies to invest in. There's so many. We just need to get the money and raise the money in order to invest in them. But one that I like at the moment is a company called Othelia, and it's in the AI space, and it helps companies and script writers with scripts, so helping them accelerate the process of doing that, because there's so much content out there now, and sometimes that's the one thing that slows production down, or getting content onto a platform, is the fact that the script can take so long to do. So I would say that they actually got a lot of success here in the US now. And interestingly, Marissa, my co-founder, and I were talking about this the other day, that we actually thought that ChatGPT would be the demise of their product, but we believe only accelerated their business. So that's one to look out for. And they're doing some great stuff over here with some of the bigger content companies now.
Yeah. Kate, talk us through what it was like to navigate through the tech world as a female. Was it a boys' club, or were there a lot of female people that, like, I don't know, were there heaps of women involved?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, well, Google was a tech company, so a lot of engineers and not many female engineers. So that side of the business was very male dominated, and I worked on a number of strategies in Australia to try and attract girls to studying STEM at university. And it was a huge focus of ours to try and bring on more women. But yeah, I mean, on the corporate side of the business, I think it was at a time where Google and both Spotify actually were really aware of diversity and trying to make sure that we had a well-balanced workforce. But I also saw that there was a real lack of opportunity for young women to have mentorship and for women to look up to. And I saw it happening with the men all the time, but hardly ever with women. So that kind of got me thinking about how with my future career I could help women and mentor them and help them and grow their businesses. So, and that was one of the reasons that we started ALIAVIA, to do that.
What was your decision around leaving Australia and moving to the US?
Well, that was around about 2016, and my husband at the time he has a tech company over here. So we were looking at moving here in about 2015. Then he was spending a lot of time over here, and then we decided to uproot the kids and come over here. And I was working for Spotify at the time, and I managed to keep my job for a while, but rather than my husband being on a plane, coming over here all the time, I was going on a plane back to Australia all the time. And it just wasn't working. So I think I ended up being at Spotify for about another year and a half after I moved over here.
Kate, we like to end every episode by asking our guests to share a special item with us. Have you got something you'd like to share?
Yeah. So this is a beautiful piece of artwork that my friend did for me. So this was a view from my house that I had in the Palisades that burned down in the Palisades fires.
Oh my God.
So she very quickly put that painting together for me, my friend Jennifer Leah. And yeah, it just has a lot of meaning to me, and I have it hanging here in my office. It reminds me of the
I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. We saw it was difficult to watch all the footage coming through and all the houses that were lost. And hopefully you guys are in the rebuild stage now.
No, because like a lot of people, we were underinsured, so our insurers had dropped us just before the fires. So it's a very costly exercise to rebuild when you don't have insurance to cover it. So probably not at this point.
Did you guys get much of a warning to evacuate?
Yeah, so we were on a group WhatsApp, the neighborhood group WhatsApp, and the night before, one of my neighbors just put a message up saying the winds are going to be extreme tomorrow, and we should pack a bag. So I packed a bag. Wasn't a big bag, but it had my passports, green cards, although not my kids' green cards, so that's been a bit of a nightmare, and some jewelry, and a couple of handbags. So that's what we left the house with. It was very, very quick.
Yeah.
This just reminds me, like, you know, we all we all see the stories at the time, and then we all just move on, and then we forget about what's actually going on. And you guys are still going through that right now. So how long do you think it's actually going to be for that community to get back on its feet?
A very long time. I mean, the heartbreaking thing is the loss of your entire community. So, I mean, it's a sad thing to say, but most of my friends in Los Angeles lost their homes. So it's great that we have that spirit, and we understand each other, we can talk to each other, and a lot of them live where I am now in Venice, so we're close by and can support each other. But I mean, look, it's still a mess driving through there. It's like a bomb's gone off. And sometimes it hurts to think that people's lives just go on and things go back to normal, but ours just won't. And it'll be a long time. I mean, my block of land, my block of rubble looks exactly like it did on the 8th of January when it burned down. Nothing's been removed. It's it's sad. So I would honestly say 10 years.
Yeah, wow.
10 years. Will you go back there? Will you, like that's your block of land? Will you go and rebuild back on that piece of land, or do you think you'll move?
No, I think we'll have to sell the block. Just financially, it doesn't make any sense. So, which is sad. A lot of my friends are having to do the same thing too. Well,
okay, that's horrible. Oh, well, yeah, wow, okay.
Oh, we appreciate you sharing, and it's beautiful that your friend has been able to capture at least a memory for you of that time you've had there.
She did that 3 days after my house burned down, and her husband brought it over for me as a gift. So
unreal.
Well, Kate, thank you so much for giving us your time, and we really appreciate you joining the podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Sonia.